Perfect. Alrighty. Okay. So for those of you who that have joined or are still presently joining us, we ask that you please drop your name, where you are from, and your affiliation in the chat. I will also be dropping a copy of our agenda in the chat so that you may also have a copy and follow along with us. If you have any questions throughout the presentation or need clarification on a specific term, if you would just like to know more, please feel free to interject and ask. Additionally, you may also write your questions in the chat box. Trisha will be checking those. And after the presentation is complete, we will have a open period for Q&A. So in which myself and Trisha will be addressing your questions. So again, I do want to advise you all that this meeting is being recorded, and a copy of this presentation and the video recording will be uploaded to our website for everyone's convenience and future reference. So with that being said, let's go ahead and begin with our introduction. So I see a lot of familiar faces that are with us here today, but I'm also glad to see a lot of new faces that have joined us. Now, for those of you who don't already know me, I'll briefly introduce myself and allow our executive director to introduce herself as well. So once again, hello everyone. My name is Martin Castro. I am the Watershed Science Director here at RGISC. I began my duties earlier this year in March. Prior to my appointment here at RGISC, I worked as a natural resource specialist for the Texas Commission on Environmental Equality, or TCEQ, where I spent 7.5 years working under the authority of the Rio Grande Water Master Program here in Laredo, Texas. And in that capacity, I was responsible for monitoring and conducting inspections and investigations of surface water diversion sites along the Rio Grande and its tributaries in order to ensure compliance with state laws, rules, and regulations. With that being said, I will let the person that I believe is the heart and soul of this organization introduce herself and say a few words. Go ahead, Trisha.
Everybody, welcome, muy bienvenidos. We're so happy that you're here. This is for us, this feels groundbreaking for us, the creation of a new watershed group for our stretch of the river, which Martin's gonna review with y'all, from Eagle Pass down to the southern tip of Webb. And what this is all about is using science and data to help fix ongoing challenges and issues that we have with our stretch of the river. And we want you to feel empowered. We hope y'all become active members of what we want this to become a vibrant watershed planning group. We know there's all different sorts of stakeholders on this call that care. We're all stakeholders, but some with very vested interests, and your voice and your input is vital and critical to helping us build collectively a river restoration plan, hopefully to start carrying out projects in the near future. So as Martin said, please put in questions you have in the chat. If they're very relevant to that slide, I'll interrupt Martin, so that we can take your questions during, if you need clarification on things or have an urgent thing you'd like to mention. And then as Martin said at the end, then we'll go ahead and have more of a open discussion. So again, thank y'all so much for spending part of your afternoon with us. This is really critical and really important for our region of the world. So thank you.
All righty, Trisha, thank you for that introduction. So I'm moving right along. I'd like to open this presentation by briefly reading the following vision statement for the San Anbrosia-Santa Isabel watershed. So we at RGISC, we at the Rio Grande International Study Center, believe that the San Anbrosia-Santa Isabel watershed can be restored to its near original quality of life by reversing the harmful effects of factors such as pollution, erosion, riparian degradation, invasive species, low river flows, and infrastructure needs. And we believe that nearly the entire watershed can be restored in an economic and environmentally conscious way so that educated and knowledgeable communities within the watershed can enjoy its many natural landscapes and features, whilst still preserving, monitoring, and protecting the watershed's most important natural resource, the Rio Grande River. Alrighty, so in these next couple of slides, I will just present a brief overview of the Rio Grande Basin, just to bring everyone up to speed. Some of you may already know or be familiar with this information. Some of you may not. In any case, here we go. The Rio Grande Basin, as you may already know, occupies an enormous area, 335,000 square miles to be exact. The Rio Grande itself is the third longest river in North America, in the United States, excuse me, and the fourth largest in North America. The headwaters of the Rio Grande begin at the base of the San Juan Mountains in Colorado. And as it flows downstream, it will pass through 3 US states and 5 Mexican states. After a 1,990-mile journey, the Rio Grande eventually meets the ocean, where it empties into the Gulf of Mexico. And of course, in many cases, the Rio Grande is the only source of drinking water for many of the communities that live along its banks. Unfortunately, it is also one of the top 10 most endangered rivers in the world, according to the World Wildlife Fund. Now, the Rio Grande and Laredo, as we know it, now the Rio Grande, as we know in Eagle Pass and Laredo, along with our sister cities of Piedras Negras and Nuevo Laredo, is present in a segment between Del Rio, Texas and Zapata, Texas, which is known as the Middle Rio Grande. Now, there's an interesting misconception that some folks may have, and that is that the Rio Grande in this segment is not per se a free-flowing river. In fact, its flows are highly managed through controlled releases from 2 reservoirs, Amistad International Dam and Reservoir in Del Rio, Texas, and Falcon International Dam and Reservoir outside Zapata, Texas. Both dams are operated by the International Boundary and Water Commission, or IBWC. Now, the Rio Grande has historically faced numerous threats such as pollution, threats such as invasive species, urbanization, which has led to habitat loss, reduced flows as a result of an ongoing drought, increasing temperatures, climate change, and many others. All of these will only add additional burdens to the already highly stressed river system. And with this, I want to bring you all into what is the main part of this presentation and introduce you all to the Watershed Project itself and the work that our organization is undertaking. So for starters, one of the most commonly asked questions I get is, where is the funding for this project coming from? In other words, who and what is funding this new endeavor? Well, the funding for this project comes from the United States Bureau of Reclamation, or USBR. The USBR is a federal agency under the US Department of the Interior. The USBR is primarily responsible for the management and development of many of the large federal dams and water diversion structures, mainly located throughout the western United States. In later slides, I'll explain why the USBR specifically awarded us this grant and how the funds that have been allocated to this project will be used towards the fulfillment of the grant deliverables. Alrighty, so moving right along, what is a watershed? Some of you here today might be a little bit less familiar with this terminology, so I will try and explain it to the best of my abilities, what a watershed is, so that way, as we move into some of the more technical aspects of this presentation, you will have a general understanding of the concept and the work our organization has undertaken. Now, generally speaking, a watershed is an area of land where precipitation collects and drains into a common outlet, usually a body of water, which can be a lake, a bay, an ocean, or a river. For our watershed, the one that is referenced in this project, that is, this common body of water is the Rio Grande. Lastly, you may hear the word watershed itself, sometimes used interchangeably with the terms drainage basin or catchment basin. And there's a simpler way to put this. I like to use the analogy of trying to explain what a watershed is to folks by using the example of Russian nesting dolls. Now, No matter in what part of the country, whether you are in the United States or Mexico or any country for that matter, you are always located within a watershed. And that usually just depends on the scale or size of the area that you're trying to look at. Larger watersheds typically contain many smaller or sub-watersheds. This depends on the outflow point. In other words, all of the land that drains water into the outflow point is the watershed for that outflow location. Now, this is important because the stream flow and the water quality of a water body, in this case the river, is affected by issues and matters that are happening in the area above or upstream of the outflow point, which is located downstream. So in the next slide, I'll try and give everyone a better idea of the size and scope of this project and the geographic area that we will be targeting for our watershed restoration project, which can be mildly represented at this level. So following up on the analogy I presented in the previous slide, this slide should give you an accurate representation of where the watershed is located geographically and spatially. According to the United States Geological Survey, or USGS, each hydrologic unit is defined by a unique hydrologic unit code, or HUC, consisting of 2 to 12 digits based on the 6 levels of classification that the USGS uses. For the purposes of this presentation, we'll be taking a closer look at the first 4 levels. I'll begin at the highest scale classification of the hierarchy, beginning with the Rio Grande Basin, which is actually classified as a region. This is followed by the second classification, which is called a subregion. And this subregion, in this area here, is the Rio Grande Falcon subregion. From the Rio Grande Falcon subregion, we move into a basin, which is a 6-digit HUC. We're moving down the hierarchy here. And finally, we arrive, if we zoom in here, to the geographic scale of the San Anbrosia-Santa Isabel watershed, which is officially classified as a sub-basin. In the next couple of slides, I'll also briefly go over some facts and other interesting details about the San Anbrosia-Santa Isabel watershed. For now, please reference this project location map. A lot of these maps that I'll be sharing throughout this presentation have been uploaded to our website for stakeholders to download or for the public to download and use as they see fit. So don't forget to check that out. Now, when I talk about watershed boundaries, boundaries are important as they define the extent of surface water drainage to a point. Now, as such, these boundaries usually tend to follow the highest ridgeline around the stream channels network, and they all meet at the bottom or lowest point of land where water flows out of the watershed. In this case, the low point of this watershed, of the San Anbrosia-Santa Isabel watershed, would be here south of Laredo. Now, this map, which was produced by our organization using digital elevation modeling, or DEM, shows the San Anbrosia-Santa Isabel watershed's elevation, the extent of its drainage area, the terrain, and the stream network order, as well as tributaries and the main stem, being the Rio Grande River. Now, this drainage area is approximately 5,768 square miles, or 14,000 square kilometers, roughly, in area. Now, in terms of size, this watershed is quite large, and it includes the state of Texas, and as well as a few Mexican states. So a couple of more facts about the watershed. The San Anbrosia-Santa Isabel watershed is so named for 2 tributaries that are present on the US side, San Ambrosia Creek and Santa Isabel Creek. Santa Isabel Creek, of course, being located within Laredo, and San Ambrosia being located a little bit outside of the city limits, outside Laredo. And the watershed, as I've already mentioned, is located in a segment of the Rio Grande Basin in South Texas, which we already mentioned earlier is known as the Middle Rio Grande Basin. And this begins in the upper portion in Maverick County, south of Amistad Reservoir, passing through the southwestern edge of Dimmitt County and to the southern tip of Webb County. Another interesting fact that you may have already noticed is that the watershed is formed by land both in the United States and Mexico. So it's considered an international watershed. And now this map, which was also produced by our organization, shows the cities and towns in both the United States and Mexico that are located within the watershed. Beginning from the upper portion of the watershed, these include the city of Eagle Pass in Maverick County, which has a population of nearly 30,000 people. And of course, its sister city, Piedras Negras in Coahuila, Mexico, which has a population of approximately 150,000 people. In the southern lower portion of the watershed, major cities include, of course, the city of Laredo in Webb County, which has a population of more than 260,000 people, and our wonderful sister city of Nuevo Laredo in Tamaulipas, Mexico, which has a population of nearly 375,000 people. Now, when we talk about population, I'm sorry, was there a question? Okay, I thought I heard something. When we talk about population, I like to talk about the type of population growth we are expected to see within the watershed. So, according to the Rio Grande Regional Water Planning Group in their 2021 Regional Water Plan for Region M, which includes Webb County and Maverick County, for the two U.S. counties that are located within the watershed, Webb and Maverick, based on the current projection estimates, we are expected to see the following population increase from 2020 to 2070, which is represented here by this figure. The city, I'm sorry, Webb County, of course, being shown here in blue, and Maverick County, population for Maverick County being shown in orange. The most significant increase will be seen in Webb County, of course, where the population is expected to increase to just over 647,000 people by 2070. That's 50 years from now. Maverick County's projected growth is not quite as significant as Webb's, but nevertheless, this begs the question, can our watershed sustain, and can our watershed and the most important natural resource, the Rio Grande River that is, can it adequately sustain the municipal demand for drinking water for these populations in the next 50 years? And I'll be partially answering that question later on in this presentation. So moving on from our watershed maps and tables, I want to give you all a brief overview of the timeline of this project and some of the phases involved, and I will go into more detail about these phases in the next slide. This begins with our project launch in spring of this year, 2021, followed by phase 1, which will encompass data collection and stakeholder interviews. This will be followed by our first public meeting in August of 2021, which, by the way, is being held as we speak. Phase 2 will see a collaborative planning effort, meetings with stakeholders. And this will be followed by a second public meeting to be held possibly in October of this year. Phase 3 will include the production of a summary report for stakeholders and the public. And finally, we will see the conclusion of the project via the submittal of the final report in the fall of 2022, next year. Now, the way in which we have approached the development and formation of a new watershed stakeholder group and a watershed restoration plan is in 3 phases. In phase 1, we plan to synthesize information from research that has been completed at the federal, state, and local levels, as well as any and all relevant academic research that is pertinent to this project. Following the synthesis, we will conduct one-on-one interviews with diverse stakeholders, which I have actually already had with some of you, and these stakeholders will represent major water user groups. In phase 2, we will host a series of meetings for stakeholders to collaboratively review the synthesized information and the list of concepts and suggestions compiled from these interviews. So, and the goal of the meetings will be to identify and prioritize watershed management projects. Between these meetings, we will review new quantitative and qualitative data that comes to light and conduct relevant geospatial analysis in order to inform the process. And finally, in phase 3, we will produce a summary report available to project participants, stakeholders, and the public that will detail key objectives and priority projects for the watershed. Now, this project in its entirety ties into our organization's much broader water security, land, and climate change program. But how so does this tie in? And what does water security mean for our community? What is water security? I'll try to explain that. Now, remember that vision statement that I read at the beginning of this presentation? Keep in mind what I had mentioned, and this next part should make a little bit more sense. When it comes to water security, societies and communities can enjoy water security when they are able to successfully manage their water resources and services to meet the demands of each dimension of water security. There are several, which I'll show in the following visual representation. When we talk about domestic water security, that means we're trying to, communities should be able to provide people with reliable and safe drinking water. From an economic perspective, this means that a community should strive to sustain and to support productive economies in the agriculture, industry, and energy sectors. From an urban standpoint, we can create better water management services to support vibrant and livable communities. Environmentally, this means the environmentally conscious restoration of rivers and ecosystems. And lastly, we should build resilient communities that can adapt to change and before and after major disasters such as floods that's sometimes sent to strike our communities. So before I move on, I'd like to address as to why this program was developed, as I promised near the beginning of our presentation. In our original written request to the USBR, we sought funding to develop a new watershed group, primarily because no such entity existed within the watershed before. Our organization, meanwhile, has completed little to no restoration planning or projects, and we require more substantial support to build our capacities to undertake these types of projects. And that includes the establishment of a watershed stakeholder group, complete outreach to stakeholders, and fund critical restoration work. Additionally, there are few existing studies from public and private entities that have fully addressed this area of the Rio Grande. And we have anticipated that the geographic scale within the watershed that we are working within is the appropriate and best level for which we can achieve results for our region. And just very briefly, some of the restoration and project objectives include improved water quality and water quantity, relationship building between stakeholders, identification of historic landscapes, and many others. And from those objectives, we hope to identify and prioritize solutions to some of the more persistent problems and future challenges that the watershed faces in order to secure the necessary funding to begin to restore the watershed. And this will be accomplished via the drafting of a formal watershed restoration plan. Now, at this point, some of you are probably asking, well, what is a watershed restoration plan? What exactly does a watershed restoration plan entail? What does it do? I've already mentioned it several times during this presentation. So in this slide, I'll try and address this very commonly asked question. A watershed restoration plan is an important tool for identifying and prioritizing the work necessary to improve water resources in a particular watershed. It provides the step-by-step framework for identifying issues and outlining solutions within the watershed and the resources needed to carry them out, be it by financial, technical, or volunteer means. For example, these issues and their solutions may include riparian restoration efforts, channel reconstruction, stream restoration, landscape restoration, natural enhancements, and many others. For the majority of watershed restoration plans, the primary goals usually tend to focus on the water quality perspective of things. That's usually done by primarily trying to reduce non-point source pollutants. But each watershed restoration plan also has the opportunity to express unique concerns or conservation goals for that particular watershed.
Very quickly, Martin, there are a couple of good questions here. People asking if there's any population between Eagle Pass and Laredo. And there are some small pockets, mainly on the Mexican side. And then another question that came up is, are there other active groups like ours, what we're creating right now above us or below us along the river? And that's a very good question, and we need to find out if that's the case. And Virginia is on this call, and I don't know if she might know, but if not, certainly we can ask the USBR if there are any such active other groups like ours along the river, upstream or downstream.
So I know, let me start by answering the first question about populations between Eagle Pass. I think Eagle Pass and Laredo, was that the question, Tricia?
Yes, and Tom
Okay.
Miller put about Hidalgo too, so yes. All right.
Okay. Yes, there are population. I do have population numbers for those smaller communities between the larger cities. I didn't I didn't pull up those numbers for this presentation. The population numbers I mentioned earlier in the graph I showed earlier for the projected growth came straight from the Region M planning meeting, which doesn't include, of course, communities in Mexico. It's just in the United States, it's just in Texas. But I will try and address those numbers in the future, or perhaps during the next meeting, to have a better picture. As for the second question, I do know of a few watershed stakeholder planning groups that are, I think, in the works, or have been in the works in the past, even before this project in the Lower Rio Grande Valley. I think the Arroyo Colorado is an example of one. If I'm getting the name correct, in the Lower Rio Grande Valley. That's one that I know of. As far as this area is concerned, I do not know of any other restoration stakeholder groups like ours. But I will try and address most of those. I'll try and address that question towards the end of our presentation, just so we stay on track with time. So I'll move right along. Now, as I mentioned previously, developing a watershed restoration plan requires the input of multiple stakeholders. These stakeholders, people such as yourselves, are the ones who will guide restoration plan development through input, and to a certain extent, see that stakeholder interests are also covered within the plan. However, by encouraging involvement from all watershed stakeholders, a watershed restoration plan can successfully guide water resource work that will maximize public benefit by focusing efforts on areas of the highest need, the greatest potential benefit, whilst allowing resource funding to be used more efficiently. Now, to help secure involvement for this project, we've taken considerable efforts to spread the word about the work that RGISC is doing. And I'm sure you've probably already seen a few of my newsletters, received a few phone calls, emails, text messages, social media posts, and even invites to attend these meetings. So if you've responded and you've attended, I want to thank you all for participating. It's a lot of work that goes into this, so I want to make sure that I recognize that those folks that have attended in the past and have decided to participate in this, that your efforts are also being recognized. So thank you all. Moving along. When we characterize a watershed, there are five broad categories that the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, uses to adequately characterize a watershed. In the presentation, we've already talked about a few of these, so I'll go ahead and tally those out, and we'll move along to talk about water quality impairments and concerns. Now, bacteria counts in the Laredo sector of the Rio Grande are a consistent problem, and in our section of the river, it's subsequently impaired as a result. The issues primarily stem from untreated sewage discharges from Mexican sources into the Rio Grande. Well, first of all, what does impairment even mean? For those of you who don't know, the state of Texas publishes the Texas Surface Water Quality Standards for each river basin. Now, water quality data obtained through the IBWC's Clean Rivers program is used to help determine whether particular stream segments on the Rio Grande are meeting these water quality standards. So according to the IBWC's 2020 Basin Highlights report for the Rio Grande Basin, segment 2304, which is below Amistad International Reservoir, that's the segment that's located within our watershed, it continues to be impaired by bacteria. Whilst the parameters also include toxicity in water, specifically for nitrogen-containing nutrient ammonia. High levels of this nutrient can potentially be toxic to aquatic life. And the type of concerns are concerns for near non-attainment of these water quality standards in this segment, and also concerns for water quality based on screening levels. Now, this figure is an excellent example of the impairments located geographically that are found throughout the Rio Grande Basin. Now, this figure is courtesy of IBWC, and the area within our watershed would be this area right here that's highlighted in red, which is in 2018 was reported to be continuously impaired by continues to be impaired by bacteria. Alrighty, so moving on to a water availability and conservation perspective, let's talk a little bit about water supply. According to data obtained from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, or TCEQ, Laredo has a current municipal surface water supply of 61,825 acre-feet per year for 2020, that is. That is to say, in one calendar year, the city of Laredo is authorized to divert or pump over 61,000 acre-feet of surface water from the Rio Grande for municipal use. Now, as an analogy, 1 acre-foot equates to approximately 325,851 gallons, or the amount of water needed to fill an acre of land with water that's 1 foot deep. Now, we use acre-feet when we talk about volumes, just simply to avoid getting into these large numbers. If we were to stick to gallons, for example, it's a little bit more difficult to visualize it. And this current municipal supply for Laredo will possibly meet demands through the year 2040. Why 2040? Well, let me explain. So like many things, this supply is not infinite. With those numbers in mind, let's look at the current water supply and demand within the watershed for the city of Laredo and the city of Eagle Pass. Again, according to the Rio Grande Regional Water Planning Group in their 2021 Regional Water Plan report for Region M, the municipal water demand for the city of Laredo is expected to increase by 63% to 2070. Whilst the municipal water demand for the city of Eagle Pass is expected to increase by 51% by 2070. These volumes, of course, all being in acre-feet. But of course, the key to remember here is this year right here, 2040. Because by 2040, the city of Laredo is expected to exhaust the available supply of 61,825 acre-feet of municipal water that was allocated per year. As you can see in 2040, the expected demand is pretty close to the supply of 61,000 acre feet. So some of the options that are being considered in order to prepare for this future date is the possibility of secondary water sources and alternatives to meet the needs for Laredo's expected population growth and water demand. And I can answer some of those questions and where this work is being done, who is undertaking this work at the end of the presentation.
Martin, I just wanted to underscore that was information that came out from the city last week. It was very significant.
Yes.
Just that they are projecting that the river will cease to exist as our only source of drinking water for 19 more years until 2040. So that was pretty significant because they had not really shared that kind of information.
Sorry, Tricia, can you say that again? You're saying that with the current flows of the Rio Grande, they're expecting that they won't have sufficient supply to meet demand by 2040?
Yes, right. With our population growth, that 2040, they want their consultants are wanting the city to have a new secondary water system in place by 2040 because they're saying the river will not be able to provide all of our city of Laredo water usage by 2040.
Tricia, are you suggesting that the availability of water in the Rio Grande is finite to 62,000 acre feet?
No, that simply, let me answer that question. That simply means that the city of Laredo being.
I know what it means. I understand what it means.
Okay, well, no, I'm just saying that it's finite, but the amount of water the city of Laredo is authorized to divert in any year currently is only 61,000 acre feet. Now, the only way to offset the demand that we may see in the next 20 years is there's two options. The city of Laredo can buy more water rights and increase their authorized water right amount per year to say they can divert more than the 61,000 acre foot limit. Or in this case, we can plan for a secondary water source alternative, which I think is a little bit more feasible than just trying to buy up more water rights to add to, a system that doesn't hold past a certain amount. And
They can do both.
I'm sorry?
Or they can do both.
Right. And historically, the city of Laredo always was buying water rights. Even when I was with TCEQ, they're pretty well prepared. As a matter of fact, I mean, at least to last another 20 years, they have enough water in their account to supply the city. It's just a matter of whether or not the river can supply that till 2040. So of course, though, there is preparations being done to address that concern.
What is the capacity?
Let me go ahead and answer that question towards the end of the presentation, just so we stay on track. I'll be more than happy to answer it. We're almost done. So in this next part of the presentation, we wanted to share with you all some of the results of our Watershed Stakeholder Survey. Now, for those that haven't heard or are not aware of this, I won't go through, I'm sorry, for those that haven't heard or are not aware of this, a Watershed Stakeholder Survey was created by our organization in order to receive input for this project and receive feedback and hear from you, the stakeholders, on what you all think are the issues that the watershed is facing, and suggest solutions to some or suggest what kind of resources we can use in order to address those issues. And I made it in both English and Spanish, and it's up on our website. And I won't go through all the results for each question in the survey. There are a total of 15, but I will just want to highlight the first 4 or so, which I feel are some of the most important questions that have been asked in the survey. And at the end of this presentation, I will drop a link in the chat for those that are interested in providing feedback. Okay, so question one was, what was your interest in the San Anbrosia-Santa Isabel watershed? So from this visual graphic here, we can see that the answer choice chosen out of a total of 39 respondents that answered the survey, 56% went ahead and answered that they are concerned individuals living within the watershed. That was the top answer choice. The second answer choice, which was a little bit surprising to me and Tricia, was that a lot of the 39 respondents who were surveyed answered that they were also outdoor recreational enthusiasts within the watershed. So that gives you a general idea of the kind of individuals that are trying to provide input. And these choices help delineate, you know, the kind of feedback and the demographics that we're receiving feedback from. Question two was asked, what do you think are the biggest problems the watershed is facing today? I think probably the most important question. And of course, it's no surprise that the top answer choice was water quality and pollution. You know, I think this is typical of you know, when it comes to talking about water, water quality is usually the most controversial topic and the most hotly debated topic in any you know, in any such project or things of that nature. The second most biggest problem that people thought was most you know, the biggest problem that second biggest problem the watershed is facing was this one here, threats to native habitat loss and riparian degradation. And that was followed by low river flows and water shortages. So, you know, we have a general idea of the top three problems that are facing the watershed. And of course, as we continue to receive more feedback for this survey, which is still open, these numbers may change a little bit, but I don't expect, you know, water quality to be, you know, to be put in second place. I think it's still going to be the number one problem that our watershed is facing. And question three was just simply asking, can folks identify where they were located on the maps that I have provided to them for the survey? Most folks out of 39 people, 37, excuse me, respondents said yes, that they are located within the watershed and they can identify where they are. A few folks said no. Some of those folks I think were either located outside the watershed and or could not identify themselves and whether or not they were within it, the boundaries. And lastly, the last question, based on the current use of the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo, and the expected use of the Rio Grande in the future, which were the following uses that people considered most important to them? And no surprise that municipal drinking water use was scored the highest answer choice. This was a ranked question, so people ranked these choices in order from greatest importance to least importance. So municipal drinking water use was ranked as the highest importance. This was followed by habitat for birds and native species, which harkens back to question two, that the threats to native species were one of the biggest issues our watershed is facing. So that's pretty in line with what the general consensus is. And I think the third use was irrigation, used for irrigation and farming. Okay, we're pretty much reaching the end of our presentation here in these next just a few more slides, and we'll have an open question and answer session. From here, I'll go ahead and take you all through a historical landscape analysis that we have done with our GIS software. Now, very quickly, before I continue into this part of the presentation, I want you all to keep in mind the visual analogy that is represented within this graphic. I was told by a mentor of mine recently, in his own words, that there is no greater architect than Mother Nature. And with that being said, we'll take you through in-depth analysis of present-day Laredo and Laredo as it appeared in 1959 in order to uncover landscapes that have been changed or otherwise lost, likely due to development and urbanization. Now, this map shows Laredo as it appeared in 1959. At the time, Laredo was just about 1/4 of the size it is now. And here are a few landmarks to give you all some reference. Nuevo Laredo, which is not shown in this map, is located here in this part. The airport, which at the time was, I believe, an Air Force base, is located here, and Lake Casablanca located over here. And again, this was the extent of Laredo in 1959. Now, in present day Laredo, you can see it's grown quite significantly since 1959. That's 70 years. And from here, I will show a flood zone map of present day Laredo. So we'll overlay the flood zone, and the areas in blue highlight the areas within the flood zone that would become inundated during a 100-year flood. The areas in red are floodways, which are channels and adjacent land areas that are used to control the flow of floodwaters to stop or prevent the surrounding surface elevation from increasing. Without a floodway, some communities would be inundated with floodwaters due to higher upstream flood elevation. Now, in our part of the watershed, which includes the city of Laredo, I want to point out 3 of Laredo's major tributaries. We have Manadas Creek, Zacate Creek, and Chacon Creek. In our analysis, however, we'll be taking a specific and in-depth look into one tributary in particular, Manadas Creek. So from the previous slide, we've zoomed into our area of interest. This is present-day Laredo near Del Mar, and present-day Manadas Creek as it flows downstream to the Rio Grande. The arrow in red highlights the main stem or channel of Manadas Creek. The other areas in blue outside the main stem are simply smaller tributaries of Manadas Creek that flow into the main stem. Now, in our analysis, we have been investigating why certain areas of Laredo tend to flood more than others, specifically, for example, this area in red. Now, for reference, we'll go ahead and zoom in here. This is I-35 to the left here. And this is Del Mar Boulevard, along with surrounding commercial and residential areas. You can see Manadas Creek as it flows present day through this channel here. So in order to understand why this part of Laredo floods, let's go ahead and analyze Manadas Creek as it flowed in 1959. So we'll remove those present day layers. And we can see that Manadas Creek flowed something more like this. So with this analysis, it's important to point out that the natural hydrology of these creeks still exists underneath the commercial and residential development and areas that are present in present-day Laredo. So our analysis suggests that the natural hydrology of Manadas Creek has changed in the last 70 years, most likely due to the development and urbanization of Laredo. And as a result, this has contributed to flooding, in manners that are not natural. That these are flooding that's considered unnatural because this is not how Manadas Creek flowed back in 1959. It was a much different tributary back then. Now, using our mapping and analysis software, we still have several ongoing analysis projects that we're working on. I am currently working on an analysis of all at-risk species within the watershed. Those are federally listed or endangered species. Of course, I'm still working on completing my historical landscapes and tributaries analysis, not only for Laredo, but for other parts of the watershed as well. And I'll also be creating detailed water quality maps of the non-point source pollutants within the watershed. So closing up our presentation here, why is this work all important? Well, for starters, water is a critical resource for human health, economic growth, and agricultural productivity. Secondly, when we talked about water security earlier in the presentation, we talked about how water security can only be achieved when there is enough water for everyone in a region and the water supply is not at risk of disappearing or at risk of contamination. The work our organization will be doing will be done in such a way that we will be disseminating the information and feedback from you, the stakeholders, the public, to identify some of the more persistent problems our watershed faces. Because securing our water will be essential for a better future for generations to come. So to conclude, we at RGISC foresee a future where we have established greater water security for Laredo and surrounding communities. As we have previously mentioned, we are currently in the process of creating a watershed restoration plan in order to propose solutions to the current problems the watershed is facing and secure funding to begin restoration work. And eventually, we foresee being able to secure funding to restore the watershed. And, okay, this is the last slide. The call to action, what can you do to help? You can become a donating member to RGISC. Spread the word to coworkers, family, friends, teachers, enthusiasts, anyone who is interested in the work we're doing and who wants to participate in this endeavor. They're more than welcome to get in touch with me. And lastly, take our watershed survey. You know, tell us what you think are the biggest issues our watershed is facing. You know, this is the best way to get your voice heard, and it will be part of the final report. You know, those results that I shown earlier will be part of the report to the Bureau. Alrighty, okay, so we'll end our presentation here and have the next, looks like we're right on time with 2 o'clock here, which I scheduled to have an open period for Q&A for about 15-20 minutes. So I'll go ahead and stop the presentation here and go ahead and read some of the questions that we may have received. Go ahead, Tricia.
Yeah, no, I was going to say there are some good questions that have come in, and if you want to identify yourself and your affiliation, that'd be great. Why don't we start with Eddie?
Thank you, Tricia. Martin, excellent presentation. My question here toward the end was identifying the funding sources that we will be able to pursue funding for these type of improvements. I just wanted to see what comes to your mind. I think the Texas Water Development Board is one, but if you can just touch a little bit on what you know from your experience.
Right. So I think Eddie and Martin, feel free to jump in. Certainly there's going to be governmental sources, but we also want to look at foundations and private sector as well. And government being, like you mentioned, at the state level, the Water Development Board, maybe TCEQ, depending on what the restoration project entails. At the federal level, I think there's still different phases that we can apply for with the Bureau of Reclamation. EPA and NADBank are also options as well. And then at a local level, you know, the city and county to see, you know, if there's certain projects that would make sense that overlap with their goals and interests as well. And also we want to look at foundations that care about this type of work, water security, river health, things like that. So I think there will be an interesting combination. Eddie, hopefully in the future we can partner with some ranchers, depending on what the projects are. I think that will be really neat. But we're excited to see how this plan starts to develop with everybody's input. And just one last thing, as Martin mentioned, this is just sort of the first introductory meeting, and the next ones to follow. The goal is, and Martin can explain more, is to have a more interactive as well with people, you know, really diving deeper and getting their thoughts down as well. But thank you for that question, Eddie. And if you have a follow-up, yes.
I just think that as we work on this this plan, that we develop it in a sense that it follows the formats of some of the funding agencies that we plan to pursue. So that way we're already kind of following what they're used to seeing when they receive applications for any type of funding that we might pursue. And I think that's what I saw today. I think is really hitting a lot of the valid points. So excellent presentation, Martin.
Mr. Brewer, it seems like you had something to add to that as well. Okay,
I see that question. I'll go ahead and just read it out for folks. Oh,
Sorry,
there you
guys.
Go
Sorry
ahead.
about that.
No
I was
worries.
gonna say, the TCEQ and the Texas State Soil Water Conservation Board, they would be potential funding partners, especially in the non-point source program realm. I'm not so sure how soon you would want to engage them into like the planning process. But yeah, they could aid as far as kind of getting ducks in a row as far as what sort of monitoring data would have to be in place, kind of along those lines. But yeah, through their program, as far as the water quality non-point source route, they do have funding programs available. I think the issue with our area is that there's not a lot of water quality data to actually even kind of pinpoint what the problem is here. So that's kind of maybe a little bit further down the line.
thank you very much for that, Mr. Brewer. And we agree with you. It'd be like amazing, right, to someday have real-time monitors in the river in our stretch and get like a very good understanding of our water quality. So
What they just may be a partner we may want to engage with as far as, you know, getting their feedback as far as, you know, what would be our next steps as far as how to secure monitoring and, you know, what available programs are available in Texas. So just want to throw that out there.
thank you so much. Let's see, and Mr. Brewer, you're with the South Texas Development, the full name of it?
The South Texas Development Council.
Okay.
We're the cog down here, and we cover Webb, Star, Jim Hogg, and Zapata counties.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And for those, Eddie didn't introduce himself. He's owner of Crane Engineering, an engineer and hydrologist, does a lot of work for the local governments and others as well, developments. Thank you, Eddie. Michael Gonzalez has his hand up. Michael, if you could introduce yourself and your affiliation as well.
Sure, Michael Gonzalez. I'm the Senior Director of External Affairs for Laredo College. Glad to be a part of this group, and just want to start by saying, Martin and Trisha and the team, great job on this presentation, getting this information together and getting this out to everybody. It was very interesting, including the number of issues that you raised as a part of your presentation. I just wanted to follow up on a particular question. I believe, Steve, I think you raised it a little bit earlier, but you know, one of the things that really caught my eye was availability of water for future use for our area. And I think the question had to do with, you know, overall capacity and the viability of the one option of, purchasing additional water rights for our area. Do we have any data on that at this point? That would be my first question. And then just, you know, looking forward to continuing to collaborate with this group through the college in any way that we can assist in the efforts.
So in terms of the availability of water for the city of Laredo and the purchasing of new water rights to increase the availability of how much the city of Laredo is allowed to divert through their authorized water right in a calendar year. That data comes directly from TCEQ. I don't have that data in front of me as we speak, but I can certainly, and like I said, in the next presentation, I will have a more detailed. I can certainly focus a lot more on the demand versus supply aspect of this a part of the project. And that is water availability and conservation, which is what I did for 7 years. It was a big part of my responsibilities at TCEQ, so I know quite a bit about it. It's just this presentation was focused a little bit more on the introductory side of the overall project. But that is the 61,825 acre feet per year is the available supply that the city of Laredo is allowed to divert. Now, that doesn't mean that the Rio Grande will always sustain adequately be able to sustain that. And we, as the Region M water plan document states, that in 2040, the Rio Grande will no longer be able to sustain that kind of demand. And so alternative sources are being looked at. Tricia mentioned earlier in the presentation that the city of Laredo actually hosted a 50-year master plan meeting about 2 weeks ago, actually, where they discussed this information, and they discussed the alternative sources of water, one being a secondary source, and I think the other one being an emergency source. But if you'd like to know more about it, I can definitely put you in touch with the folks that are responsible for that. The city, of course, hiring their third-party consultants to build that, and that's actually how I found out a lot about this. Well, I knew about water supply and demand, but the region and planning document had a lot more information than the research I was doing on my own, because it's over 1,000 pages, so it had a lot of information. So I also highly suggest, Michael, that you take a look at that document, and I can send you a copy of that document if you wish.
And yes, and what we're planning to do is later this week, we're gonna get that presentation from the city consultants on the 50-year water plan and then the 50-year wastewater plan. And Martin took great notes. We're gonna have like just a short synopsis, 1-pager or whatever. And we're gonna upload that onto our website and share that link with y'all if you wanna see what the city consultants are saying. And then Martin, who took great notes during that meeting as well. So thank you, Michael, for that. And yes, we definitely want to put our heads together on collaborations with LC. And that was interesting what Tom Miller said. We about LC having water rights as an entity themselves. Let's see, Steve Lamantia. Steve, if you would kindly introduce yourself and your affiliation / connection with the river, and your question as well. Steve, it's on mute.
Sorry about that. I am a water rights owner on the Rio Grande River and have been for, I don't know, my family has for probably close to 60 years. My understanding is the city still has a standing offer for water rights on the open market right now. And it depends on how aggressive they are to the need. Right now, they aren't very aggressive, so the pricing is not real high. But they have a standing offer that sits out there. The other thing is, I would like to see a position paper from the organization on where they stand on certain issues. There are issues that I think are important to the river. Not all of them, but one of them to me is the Carrizo cane issue, and how we handle that in the eradication of Carrizo cane, because it is a detriment to our river. It is not part of our system. It was brought here, and we need to do something about it. And different people have different ideas on how to handle that, but I think everybody would agree that we have to do something about it. The other thing is, I find it a little disheartening that there's only one water rights owner on your survey. That is, that is not representative of the people that are affected by this river. The group is not representative of that, and I really think a better effort needs to be done to try to include additional people who use this river or own the water rights on this river.
Yes, sir, Steve. So believe me when I say in the last 3-4 months, I have tried to reach out to as many people as I can. I think the biggest roadblock that I have encountered, and this was a learning experience for me as well, is because of COVID. The large majority of people that I tried to reach out to, because at the time I started this project in March, a large amount of people were still working from home. I didn't have phone numbers for everybody, so I would try and call their office, and they would just simply say, well, he or she is not here right now. Please send them a message, an email. And sometimes that's all I had to go by. So I believe me when I say that I tried to reach out to as many water right holders as I could. Of course, my outreach is still ongoing. It's a very time consuming and very tedious process. It's almost its own job, essentially. But I will certainly make a promise to you that at the next meeting, we will have more water right holders attending. Now, the Bureau, I do want to mention that the Bureau does not, as far as we know, Tricia, I think this is true, does not have a certain, quota for the amount of people that should be represented in this group. I've tried my official list, and I can share that with you all in the next meeting. I have over 120 people that I want to reach out to. I've probably reached out to about since March, and of course, there's other things that have happened in between all this work. I've probably reached out to about 60 people, or 65 to be conservative. So I'm not to the finish line yet, but I'm getting there. And of course, this survey will be open for the next coming months, probably till next year even, to keep receiving feedback. And but yes, I will certainly make a effort to include more water right holders, more landowners in this project.
And your point's well taken, Steve, on the position papers. Amede just jumped off the call, but he is a ecologist, a specialist on Carrizo and native plants for the Laredo stretch of the river, and we're working with Border Patrol right now and the city of Laredo on a plan about that. And I wish he were still on, but he's not. But yes, we will do that. And then Tom Miller. Tom, I don't know if you wanted to just your experience on the river, Tom, for several decades. Just some of your thoughts on best management practices for the Carrizo.
As Dr. Earhart would have asked us, he said, bring the goats on. Let's like we did at the college. We had 7 acres of goat eating, Carrizo cane eating goats, until the flood of 2010 occurred. If you look at the 90 miles from Eagle Pass to Laredo, the Mexican side is nearly free, but the American side is 95% Carrizo. We have stopped grazing the river. If the ranch owners would get back into a grazing program, it would be controlled. But of course, you have all the other problems, the screw worm, the fences, the other illegals coming over. I know, but that is effective. Otherwise, Border Patrol has did the mechanical eradication below the college, and it is 100% effective right now. The only cane I see down there is a native cane. The USDA does have its insects at work, both the scale and the wasp. And again, their study, again, by the college, they've reduced the biomass 20 to 30%. So it is working its way up the river. We can continue with some of the biocontrols, but otherwise, let's find some other sources. It's a great biomass. The green cane of the first 2 years is an ethanol source. What else can you do? There's there still is a demand for the woodwinds. It's the best reed in the world for that. So there's things to be done. We made kites. The people from Mexico used to come across because they didn't have any on their side, and they would come over to the college to cut it to make their piñatas. There are industries. How about mashing it up and making bricks? Ladrillera, north of the college, was a fine brick making area. Our native soil right there has got great amount of sand, clay. You add the Carrizo and you got bricks. So there are ways to do something.
All right, thank you, Tom. Thank you so much. And Steve, we might lean on you with some of these solutions as well. And then also rounding up into the corral some of your co-water rights holders as well, Steve.
The biggest water rights owner in the county is the city. And are they represented here?
I sent out, I wanted to get John Porter from the Environmental Services Department and a few other folks. I sent out emails, but I think with the boil water notice that happened a few weeks last month, things were just, my emails kind of got lost in between the mix. So I did want to see more folks. Everyone, I tried really hard. I've tried really hard to get as much diverse group of folks in this meeting today. But I will promise that I will promise that we will see a more diverse group of stakeholders in the next meeting. So my promise to you all there.
Awesome. Let's see, I think we just have a couple more minutes for some questions or comments or suggestions. If anybody has any, raise your hand or just unmute yourself.
I'm unmuting myself.
All righty, Richard.
Just a comment on the carrizo cane and the other invasive species, the water hyacinth, which has plugged up historically has plugged up the Rio Grande, especially downstream. But when I inherited the Rio Grande Advisory Council from Pastor Mike about 15 years ago, the carrizo cane was a hot topic. And apparently it still is a hot topic. And apparently it is also spreading. I've been traveling down to the Valley, Edinburgh, and I take my little zigzag shortcut through Ed Couch Elsa to get to Raymondville and come up 77. So I get to see how the sugar cane is growing and et cetera. But there is now water hyacinth growing in some of the irrigation streams in Hidalgo County. And the carrizo cane is also in that area. So these irrigation people are using drone technology to kind of get to places they've never been able to get to before. But they're at the point like, okay, how do we address this? So the voice that I hear in Laredo historically and right now from Mr. Lamantilla is being echoed downstream. So that's all I want to do is share that update with everyone here. That what is at stake is replicable throughout the watershed. We don't know if the issue prevails upstream or not. It won't take much to find that out. So I just wanted to throw that in for consideration.
Thank you, Richard. And I know here, we struggle with salt cedar, and we're seeing this like just explosion of guinea grass along the river too. We're seeing that really starting to overtake a lot of areas. So yes, definitely the invasives are going to be a top priority for this. Anybody else? Any other questions? We're really so happy that y'all are here. We're all essentially stakeholders of the watershed here in the river. Those who use it recreationally, fishing, birding, kayaking, hiking, biking. We drink the water every day. So we're all important stakeholders here, and really look forward to your input and involvement and active participation with this group as we formulate this plan that Martin is going to be working on that he talked about. So Martin, I'll turn it over to you so that we close it out.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again, Tricia. Thank you for that. I wanted to thank you all once again for the time you all took today to attend today's meeting. I know everyone is very busy right now with school right around the corner, kids returning to school, and colleges resuming classes, and just life in general ramping up again. And so we want to be cautious about the way we approach to do these meetings. I had a long discussion with Tricia about whether or not we should have hosted this meeting in person. But I think right now the consensus is, with a lot of the coronavirus cases rising across the country and in our community, it's better to be safe than sorry. A lot of people still feel that, they have personal reasons why they may not want to attend. So I think in the next meeting, I'll send out a poll. Maybe I can include an option to meet in person, and then I'll send out a few more dates. That actually worked very well. I was very surprised on the amount of feedback I got on the meeting date and time. This was the most popular date and time that was chosen out of the 3 or 4, that I emailed out. And please, everyone, if you all have any questions, or concerns, please feel free to forward any of that to me or Trisha, and I will be happy to address them.
Martin, if everybody on here, I'm gonna launch a poll. We'd like to get your thoughts. This is a question Martin and I were, grappling with, and we'd love to just get your thoughts. This is an anonymous poll, so I can't see who's answering or who's not, but if y'all wouldn't mind just clicking the option that you support best. Let's see, we're at, wow, almost everybody has answered. 88%, 92% voter turnout rate. So Webb County could learn a few lessons from us here. So let's see, it looks like we were missing 2 folks. We only needed 2 more, but I think that's good. I'll end the poll and let me show y'all what y'all thought. Share results. Can y'all see that? Is that popping up, the results?
Yes.
So it looks like, what does it say, Martin? I have trouble seeing it on my screen.
So out of 100% of stakeholders, participants polled, 70% selected that they would keep both options open for both in-person and virtual. And 30% said that Zoom was an option as well.
Okay,
So
all right.
I think in the next poll I send out, I will also include both options. And from there, we'll get a general consensus. I have a feeling it probably will be another Zoom meeting, but of course, everything has to be played by ear and during times like this. So we'll see what the consensus is for next time.
Awesome. And so Martin, you're looking at the next meeting by October, right? Is that correct?
Yes. If everything goes well, smooth, and I'll be doing a lot more outreach this month and next month. I can set a meeting date probably by the end of August, beginning of September, to give folks about a month or two to have a heads up about the date of this meeting. I wanted to give more time for this meeting, to give a better, more heads up for this first meeting. It's just things have been very, very busy here at the office. I'm wearing 3 different hats. So if I have not responded to you all's emails or anything like that, just please be patient. I will get back to you all. So we'll go ahead and tentatively set the date for sometime in October. Trisha.
All right. Thank y'all so much. Thank y'all for caring so much about our river and community. I think somebody was going to say something. But yes. Oh, there was a question. Will Martin's PowerPoint be available? And yes, we're going to make that available on the website and have that link for sure.
Yes, of course. I see another question from Mr. Henry Brewer. Henry,
Okay.
I guess I need to add you to our mailing list. I thought I did. You'll have to forgive me. There's over 4,000 people in our mailing list that we send these newsletters out to. I'll be sure to include you in the mailing list for next round.
I guess my comment was more as far as notifying landowners. I know in my previous experience in the non-point source program, Texas would put out public notices. And that seemed to kind of engage community members, or they would want to know what was going on in their watershed. I'm not sure if that's something that would be an option for y'all to do.
Yes, I'm familiar with public notices.
Just saying where it's in a newspaper, a local newspaper, or
Yes.
where the county or cities are kind of
Exactly.
being alerted to it.
I think we can look into that for the next meeting. Certainly look into it. It's part of the funding. We can use some of the funding for this project for that to get more word out. And again, I have to do a lot of personal outreach, and that's really what the beginning, leading up to this meeting was a lot of just one-to-one outreach. As much as I try to send out newsletters, you know, a lot of people don't open my emails or open the emails, you know, and so it's sometimes it's the only way to get a hold of folks is by sending them a text message or giving them a phone call. But we'll look into public notice meetings, public notices, you know, publishing them in a newspaper for probably the next round.
Great idea, Mr. Brewer. Thank you for that. We appreciate it. And yes, Mr. Vela, definitely social media are our platforms for sure. I think what we'll do, Martin, is everybody who joined this call will send you the link to the PowerPoint that you can access and use. And we'll also share that the city's 50-year master plan for water and wastewater with a little synopsis of the key points. And we'll commit to doing that in the follow-up email later this week. So great. Thank you all so much, everybody. You know, enjoy the rest of your week. We look forward to all of your input and thoughts. You know, Martin is here. We're trying to gather as much as we can and need y'all's help with that. So thank you very, very much.
Alrighty, thank you all very much for coming here today. We'll see you all soon.